Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Kistina binti Yusri from class AC 1105K 2018-691484. Would like to present our financial analysis of the company myNews. Background of the company: myNews was founded by a husband and wife named Dan Tailo and Li Chow. It was started with a single newsstand called Markbit and launched the brand myNews on 1997 with outlet opening in Mid Valley. Then the Bison company came to help expand the brand's name. We start 10 outlets and now become more than 430 outlets open in Malaysia. With a joint venture and a cooperation with other companies, myNews become the biggest chain convenience store after 7E in Malaysia. Now we move to financial ratio. The first financial ratio I'm going to present is liquidity ratio. So what is liquidity ratio? Liquidity ratio is a financial metric used to determine the debtor's ability to pay off the current debt obligation without raising external capital. The function of liquidity ratio is to measure a company's ability to pay debt obligation and its margin safety through the calculation of metric, which is these two, the current ratio and acid test ratio. From our analysis, we figure that myNews current ratio is under average 2.10. The possible cause is the current asset become decline and short-term increase, which cause the higher risk of distress to cover the current liability. The only way to present the higher risk of distress by paying off the current liability so it can save the company from interest costs and gain some discount, which is direct impact on the profit of the company. The company can increase the shareholder funds to improve the current assets, and the liquidity can increase above the industry average because the current asset more finance than thus improve the current ratio. For asset test ratio, myNews experience a lower test ratio than industry average, which by 1.92, which is bad sign for the company to gain trust from investors and partners. The possible cause of this lower asset test ratio because myNews has higher total of payable and the liquid assets are not enough to cover the liabilities. To improve the ratio, the company must increase the sales, which could increase the money of the company and settle their trade payables as soon as possible. So we move to the next presenter.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Atira binti Syairan and I'm from AC 1105K and my metric number is 2018-494-264. Okay, I would like to present to you about leverage ratio and profitability ratio. Okay, for leverage ratio, there are four ratios under it. First ratio is debt ratio. The debt ratio is defined as the ratio of total debt to the total asset expressed as a decimal or percentage. The second ratio is debt to equity. The debt to equity ratio is calculated by dividing a company's total liability by its shareholder equity. Next. And lastly, there's three. And lastly is time interest earned, a measure of a company ability to meet its debt obligation based on its current income. Next. Okay, for debt ratio, as you can see, this analysis under debt ratio is under the industry average by 12.991%. It is and the company has lower borrowing than other companies, and also the company it is, and also as it reduces potential losses that may occur in the event of liquidation. Debt to equity. Debt to equity is above than every ratio, which mean the amount it is because more amount of equity compared to external capital. The we pro we provide the recommendation to the company is decrease sale and should not take additional internal sources. Next, for the time interest earned, the percent is under the industry average. The possible cause is a reasonable operation expenses for its activity. Mm, it result is an operation profit. Hence, a company does have enough money to meet the interest obligation. This might also prevent the company to go into bankruptcy because the company still has money after deducting the operating expenses and can pay the interest obligation. For the recommendation, before that, please. Okay, for the recommendation, company could pay their debt by using their share capital. If they reduce the proportion of debt into equity, it will kindly reduce the company level of payment made for the interest. So next is profit. Next is profitability ratio. There is 5 profitability ratio under it. Firstly is gross profit margin. A company sets a company net sale revenue minus its cost of goods sold. Second is operating profit margin, uh, which is show how much profit a company makes from its core operation in relation to the total revenue if it bring it. Next, third is net profit margin. Net profit margin, the ratio of net profit to revenue for a company of business segment. Fourth is return on asset, ratio that provide how much profit a company is able to generate from its assets. Now, lastly is return on equity, a measure of financial performance calculated by dividing net income by shareholder equity. Next. Okay. For gross profit margin, the percentage is above than industry average. It is it's mean their performance is satisfactory rather than other company, which mean the company executive management team succeed in generate revenue. Possible cause of the the percentage is positive. The company can make a reasonable profit on sale, even though they have backup of 35.9%, but they do not have enough resources to cover the operating costs of the business. So the recommendation uh, is to reduce cost of raw material by buying them in bulk. This is because the more you buy, the cheaper price you can get will reduce the cost of goods sold. Next is to reduce inventory waste by identifying and managing the inventory better to save the cost. Uh, for operating margin, the percentage is above than industry average. It shows that company generate operating profit by 44.09% from 100% of sale, which is certified their performance in handling their financial statement, because it should be higher than industry average. The possible cause is the company has no problem in handling their operating expenses because they spend smartly and result in positive value of operating profit. Thus, their revenue is enough to cover the expenses. For the recommendation, the company can improve the operating profit margin by reducing operating expenses such as rent, equipment, and staff salaries. Uh, uh, Other than that, they can increase the revenue by increasing the price, and they can also increase the company average order value to the customer, because the more they buy, the more sale we can get. Next, net profit margin. The percentage is above than industry average by 12.18%. That means their performance is good compared with other company. It is satisfactory because it it is higher than 0.9%. It shows that the company having no problem to generate net income based on revenue that has been made. The possible cause for the net profit margin, uh, the net profit after tax of myNews Holding Berhad is positive, which they make and profit of and profit of RM 24,324,000 on RM 1 100 100 million 185 million 888,000 of total sales. The company spent smartly of their expenses, and especially the cost of goods sold. Cost of the goods sold amounted to RM 30 331,000 million 905,000. For the recommendation, for the recommendation for net profit margin is keep on using the cheapest raw material, limit waste raw material, and increase and review pricing strategy. For the return on asset, the percentage is under the industry average. This happened because the company is facing a net gain for the year 2019, and for that reason it provides a positive return on asset of 2.45%. The possible cause is the company does not manage to effectively utilize the use of its asset to generate income. It bear little higher expenses that resulting a loss for the year end. For the recommendation, uh, entity can use as alternative of finding a lower cost of materials needed in production to decrease cost of goods sold. Next. And lastly, return on equity. The percentage is above the industry average. Um, it is possible return to investor as company gain. The higher the return on equity, the better the return for the shareholder. That's all. Thank you for me.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Aina Shahira binti Muhammad Nur. I would like to present about the common ratio. Uh, so as you can see, this is the table. As you can see, this table is calculation for common ratio of statement of financial position for non-current asset and non-current liabilities only. Um, So, the balance sheet common size range analysis of non-current assets show that the property, plant and equipment is decreasing. The decreasing is due to disposal of assets and property, plant and equipment transferred to investment property, which are freehold land and buildings. There is increasing in trend of right of use asset because there is no figure in 2018. This is because in 2019, the company has leased contract for premise mainly retail stores, motor vehicles, warehouse and kitchen equipment used for its operation purpose. The investment properties show that the trend is increasing in 2019 with 3.7% because there is no figure in 2018. This is due to transfer of property, plant and equipment to investment property of freehold land, buildings and leasehold buildings. Next, there is likely slightly decrease in percentage from 3.8% in 2018 to 2.9% in 2019 for investment in jointly controlled entity. The company has jointly controlled with WH Smith Malaysia Sdn Bhd. The group share of result for the financial year in 2019 is 3 million. So next for deferred tax asset show that increase in trend 2019 of 0.3% because there is no figure in 2018. In 2019, the deferred tax asset are property, plant and equipment, right of use asset, and absorbed business losses and unutilized capital allowances. This deferred tax asset has not been recognized yet because it is not certain that whether sufficient future taxable profit will be available in which the group that can utilize these benefits. As for others investment, there are not many differences changes. Um, so the quote share in Malaysia between 2018 and 2019 are same, which is RM 5,000. Lastly, there is likely decrease on percentage from 0.5% in 2018 to 0.3% in 2019 for fixed deposit with licensed banks. Fixed deposit are pledged to licensed banks for bank guarantee facilities granted to the group and the jointly controlled entity, hence are not available for general use. Next, um, the balance sheet's common size analysis of non-current liabilities show that the provision for restoration cost, the trend is increased in 2019 because there is no figure in 2018. This is due to the company has obligation to restore the rented premises, uh, I'm sorry, restore the rented premises after termination of lease contract. There is likely decrease on percentage for bank borrowing because term loan the term loan bear interest at rate ranging from 4.55% to 5.62% per annum. Next, there is a lot of increase on percentage in 2019 for lease liabilities. It is because the commencement date of the lease, the group recognized lease liabilities measure at the present value of lease payment to be made over the lease term. In calculating the present value of lease payment, the group use it its incremental borrowing rate at the lease commencement date because the interest rate implicit in the lease is not readily determinable. Lastly, as for deferred tax liabilities, there is increase on percentage from 53.04% in 2018 to 9.42% in 2019 because deferred tax is not recognized for the company differences arising from the initial recognition of goodwill. So the initial recognition of asset liabilities in the transaction that is not a business combination and that affect neither accounting nor taxable for profit or loss. So this is all from common ratio. So next is the conclusion. So as a final observation, myNews is a homegrown press and retail convenience chain. So myNews current ratio and acid test ratio lower than industry average. Hence, this will indicate a higher risk of distress or default to cover all its current debts, and it is a bad sign for investor and partners because they face difficulty to their current liabilities by selling all the company liquid asset at very short notice. So as for debt ratio is lower than the industry average, so it can reduce the potential losses that may occur in the event of liquidation. Since debt to equity ratio is higher than industry average, the company should decrease its sale to make sure they have sufficient inflows to settle the debts. Next, time interest earned is lower than industry average. Thus, um, company does have enough money to meet the interest obligation and prevent the company to go into bankruptcy. As for profitability ratio, the company has a good performance because of the success in generating revenue. So the combined ratio shows that the trend of non-current asset and non-current liabilities for 2 years, year 2018 and year 2019. So for non-current asset, all of it has decreased in trend except for right of use asset, investment properties, and deferred tax asset because there is no figure in 2018. And for non-current liability, provision for restoration costs and provision for restoration costs increasing while bank borrowing and deferred tax are decreasing. That is all from us. Thank you.